Okay, so welcome back to our Soundoff 2017. So yesterday we went into a brief history of Sprite comics, um, a few important notes, basically the author character and various other things. And today we're going to talk about my webcomic. My first webcomic I did um, on my own. I was part of a group called Suicidal Sanity. That's a long story, but that was just goofing around. Verse was my first comic. It was first time I tried to do some serious storytelling to a general public and not just in some loose leaf notebook. And it is also a comic where the second half of my screen name comes from. I used to just be Shadowwing, but the character Tronics came from this game, and that's from this comic rather, and that's where my name comes from. See, Shadowwing is a name that I always wanted to use as a character's name, some kind of superhero or transformer or something. I always wanted to use that in a comic, and this was my chance to do that, which probably is the first mistake right now. I should not have me as Shadowwing from the forums. Not so much I should have used the name, but when I made the comic itself, I shouldn't have listed Shadowwing as the creator. Perhaps I should have used Troy A. I wasn't really using that at the time. But so that's not what I did, and now I suffer for it. But there was a lot more than went wrong. But first, I need to explain to you the story and get a little bit into a discussion of my mindset when I was coming up with the comic. Comics were kind of hated by a lot of people in the webcomic community. They thought it was a cop-out. They thought it was cheap. Even HomestarRunner.com made fun of Sprite comics. So, but creating a good comic of any kind, whether you're using sprites, whether you're using toys, whether you're using live actors, and frankly, I've never seen a live actor webcomic that I've enjoyed. I've seen Sprite comics, I've seen regular comics, of course. I've seen toy comics that were really good. I've never seen one with actors that really impressed me. Sorry to anybody out there who makes that or did made it in the past. I personally never got into those. The photo comics, I never got into because there's just certain limitations that you have with actors as far as sets and everything else. It's just a little easier to get past with toy-based comics or with Sprite comics. Sprite comics, you're basically designing sets too. If you're doing something set in the club, I actually had to build a nightclub for my characters to hang out at, for example. But what was the story? Well, the story that was presented starts out with Mega Man being attacked. Basically, he was jumped by 3 members of our protagonist group, Vulcan Zero, and he gets rescued because not really because I was trying to make Mega Man look bad, because in later stories he was come off totally awesome. It's just I wanted to character and show off his abilities, and the best way to do it was have him save somebody and to introduce my hero to another character, which we'll get to. So he saves Mega Man, takes out 2 of the goons, pulls another one away to kind of send a warning that he knew of Vulcan Zero, he knew what they were up to, which I'll get to, and that he was prepared to get there. He was going to destroy them. And basically, he was going to stop their plan for taking over a certain section of the multiverse. And From there, Mega Man Tronics, who secretly is Shadow Wing, by combining with a robot called the Winger, they would combine with a bird support unit, and they would combine into Shadow Wing, and they would be fighting Vulcan Zero. Vulcan Zero is this invasion force that was going through all of the sprite-based realities. Here's a little bit of world building for you. On what I said before about Sprite comics, it was a bit metatextual, but in the original concepts, it was very fourth wall breaking. As I was developing the idea, though, it was less fourth wall breaking and more, which I think was served the story much better as I was planning it. Here's the story. Some unknown time ago, probably centuries or something, the sprite-based realities were attacked by basically Sprite comics. Sprite-based reality was being invaded by what's basically, let's just call it the hand-drawn reality. It's kind of a metaphor for for hating Sprite comics. So they were kind of invading these realities and trying to destroy them. And so there was this big, huge war, and eventually led to a force. I don't know how much I've really defined it, but it led to a force called the Nega Author, because getting involved in realities were protected by not gods, but godlike beings called authors. The Authorians is what I was calling them. Authorians were obviously analogs of author characters in these more comedic comics. They weren't, in my story, they weren't just came into the comic and caused trouble. These were actually these realities. Some of them kept their godlike power. Some of them decided to become ordinary people. This was for namesake characters like mine was, although I never intended the Authorian. He was created to fight Vulcan Zero. His deal was that he was supposed to go into these other realities, different bodies, and kind of working undercover, Zero operations, and destroy them, and everything else. We left behind all his original programming, go back to the station, which was a leftover base from, and he would get a new body, and then he would go back and live his life in Spritopia. Spritopia is a nexus of the sprite-based realities. It's like a nexus point, and Vulcan Zero really wanted to blow up these nexus points, and he was going to various nexus points, leaving a copy of himself and having all these battles. And so he wasn't an Authorian, but Spritopia was kind of saved by an Authorian, and his spirit kind of dwelled within Spritopia, as did the Nega Author. So it was kind of like this internal battle going on inside. We wouldn't have seen any of that. Every now and then we would go back to the old days of this original war and the days that led up to Dimension Station, that led up to the world that we'd be seeing. So the mystery was, who was Vulcan Zero? Why are they trying to destroy the nexus points? Why are they trying to sprite-based realities when they're sprite-based beings themselves? And it was kind of a metaphor for Sprite comics and the way they were being treated by the hand-drawn comic community. Meanwhile, because I'm not somebody who's, I like to be able to jump back and forth through things, there would be different kinds of storyline. First would be Wing's battle against Vulcan Zero. There would be flashing back to the format wars, and then would also be Tronics existed in Spritopia in his home Nexus point, and he would have friends, and they would have all sorts of other kind of adventures and hijinks and everything else. And then there was Spriteverse. Basically, this was me being, this is where I get to be a little more fanficky. And Spriteverse were shades of heroes throughout the multiverse, and they were going to protect Spritopia. So this is why Vulcan Zero again, because it's got all these defenders. So they would go to these other realities, and Tronics would basically go to these realities, recruit a bunch of defenders, and then when it was time to finally confront the general, he and Winger would become Shadow Wing and fight them. And it was this whole big line of the old war, the new war, Trunks' civilian life, and then having all my favorite video game, comic, TV superheroes who in all their adventures. And I think that's one thing I probably should have left out the Spriteverse thing, but this was partially for me to have a little fanficky fun, and partially so that I could just tell something a little different. But anyway, and there were also a few of those characters that would be involved in Tronics' story. For example, some of my favorite fictional robots would be guarding Dimension Station. Brainbot from the Mega Man cartoon. And I was going to have a few other my favorite fictional robots, and they were basically in charge of Dimension Station, secretly keeping Vulcan Zero at bay until the time has finally come to face the true force behind Vulcan Zero. And all the Vulcan Zero soldiers actually have been revealed as, you remember I mentioned the character Ran? It was basically this running gag in a few Sprite comics. Well, a few of them didn't like the way they were killed off and thought they were mistreated, and they were manipulated by this dark force to become basically the Vulcan Zero robots. And this means if they got destroyed there, they would finally be released. But it was kind of a rage, they were kind of on a revenge trip. So they were being manipulated, and that's why they were trying to destroy the bite rate. And then there would be a story about pixelated realities and the inked realities, or whatever I was going to end up calling them, and their war. And it was this whole big metatextual, not fourth wall breaking like a lot of other Sprite comics, but a metatextual story basically about Sprite comics and how they should, if somebody wanted to make a Sprite comic, why shouldn't they? And it would go into all these different adventures. And then plus I'd be doing a few stories just for funsies. And eventually sometimes I might go back to these other multiverses that I create, universes that I created, these other nexus points, and see what that version of Tronics that was left behind and the adventures that he was having with those characters. So it was kind of like whatever story I felt like writing doing at that time, that chapter would be devoted to that. Each story was its own chapter, and each chapter was basically one of those adventures. It was either the format, flashing back to the format wars, Tronics' adventure with his friends, Tronics' adventures as Shadow Wing, Tronics' other selves and their adventures with their friends. So at least 5 different story concepts that I could go back and forth with at whim. And that something that would have been fun for me to draw, Sprite. Actually, with the format wars I would be drawing, and it would kind of be a way for me to learn how to draw, basically, because it would be a requirement. So I'd be getting the kind of art practice that I'm getting now with Jake and Leon. It will allow me to do all these different things, and I thought it was such a great idea because I was going to have a lot of fun making this. But it kind of bombed, and this has gone on really long. World I was creating, but why did I have trouble to my potential audience. Well, that's something I'll go into tomorrow in our final chapter. And so I think we'll end it off here and say that if you want to see my current webcomic, Jake and Leon, and you want to see my other articles and commentaries and videos and whatnot, you can head over to bwspotlight.com. And if you want to check out what everybody else taking part in the Art Soundoff Challenge is doing, twitter.com, and look for the hashtag #ArtSoundoff. And if you decide you might want to take part yourself, you have your own things about comic creating you'd like to say, you can go to artsoundoff.com and it'll show you prompts and tell you how to set things up and everything else. So you can join us and join in on the fun. But this has gone on long enough. Tomorrow, why did this fail? How did I create such a sprawling world of meta text for Sprite comics, ability to survive, and basically get rejected by this? Well, you'll find out tomorrow. Some of it was admittedly my fault. Some of it, I mean, I'm not taking all the blame, but I'll get into it tomorrow. So until then, I wish you